Sorry, Doctor.
I'll come and stand where you'd like me to stand.
All right. Is it possible for you to, oops. Rather than standing there, would it be possible for you to sort of come and get something out of your car and then go back in?
I've been advised to stand and let you take a photograph and then go away.
Harold Frederick Shipman, just the mention of his name in certain streets of Britain, will make people feel suspicious, and you may notice their expressions change from happiness to fear, terror, and sadness. Shipman is known by the title Doctor of Dea.th, as under the guise of a compassionate doctor and healer, he committed a series of murders that are nothing short of horrifying. His victims numbered 250 over 24 years of practicing medicine, but he was discovered due to a simple mistake he made, which he didn't think much of. The echo of these crimes still reverberates around the world to this day, leaving a deep, indelible scar on the medical profession. How did a compassionate doctor, who swore to save lives, turn into an omen of death and a human butcher? Harold Shipman was born on January 14, 1946, in Nottingham, England. He was the second of 3 children in a working-class family. Although he did not experience a physically harsh childhood, it was emotionally difficult. He was not subjected to beatings, but he witnessed with his own eyes his domineering mother, Vera, insult and beat his father every evening. His father was a symbol of masculinity, or that superhero figure in the eyes of the innocent child. In the early 1960s, when Harold was 17, his mother was diagnosed with lung cancer, and during her treatment in the hospital, Harold noticed how the doctors used morphine to alleviate his mother's suffering. It was at that moment what psychological experts later described on the Intestine website as the turning point, the moment when Shipman's demon was born, fueling his homicidal tendencies and inspiring his sadistic method of killing. Began with the event when Harold was 17. Harold was an intelligent and outstanding student, and he enrolled in Leeds Medical School, where he met his future wife, Primrose. They married in 1966 and had 4 children together. Shipman graduated from medical school in 1970 and started his career as a general practitioner in a hospital, but his shy and reclusive personality deeply affected his psychology. Additionally, his oddities and behaviors contributed significantly to shaping the character of the man who would become a future serial killer. Shipman's first job was at the Bond Fracture General Clinic in West Yorkshire. In 1974, he took the position of general practitioner at the Abraham or Myrid Medical Center in Todbridge. However, his career was threatened after he was caught forging prescriptions for the opioid painkiller Thydon. By the mid-1970s, it was discovered that Dr. Shipman was addicted to morphine and its derivatives. Given his profession, it was not difficult for him to obtain these substances, but the effects of his addiction were apparent, and his colleagues in the hospital took notice. Consequently, they had no choice but to report him, and while he was exiled, they allowed him to continue practicing medicine, but they forced him into an addiction treatment program. The medical authorities ignored these early warning signs of his potential misconduct, and no one knew they were dealing with a serial killer in the making. By the end of the 1970s, specifically in 1977, Shipman moved to hide in Greater Manchester, where he managed to turn his life around and overcome his addiction. He then secured another position as a general practitioner at the Dunbrook Medical Center in Hyde County, where he regained the trust of the people. Over the next 24 years, no suspicions arose around him, but it was during this very period that the killing spree began. In 1998, some workers in the city's morgue noticed something strange. The number of deaths among Dr. Shipman's patients, who came from his ward to be prepared for burial, was unusually high. Initially, despite suspicions, no one dared to speak up or even ask questions, as a hospital is a place where patients die, which is to be expected. However, the suspicions began to grow, and rumors spread among the doctors, nurses, and even the cleaning staff. These rumors suggested that Shipman was hiding something. The medical center's management reported the matter to the police, who sent officers to investigate these complaints. However, Harold was not stupid. He was already aware of their coming and left no evidence they could use against him. The police arrived, investigated, and left empty-handed. Harold took advantage of his position as a doctor to easily access his victims, and his medical authority allowed him to evade suspicion. Harold's method of killing was simple and devious. He selected his victims with great care. He targeted elderly women who came in for medical checkups and then injected them with a lethal dose of diamorphine, or pharmaceutical heroin, causing the victim to die within minutes without a drop of blood or any resistance. He would falsify the medical records to make it seem as if his victims were in poor health when they arrived, thus concealing the true cause of death. Harold carried out his killings at a rate of once or twice a month for approximately 24 years, and no one discovered what he was doing. The high number of deaths attributed to one doctor would normally and logically raise suspicion, especially if it continued for a year or two, let alone 24 years. But Harold was sly and cunning. He avoided being caught for all these years by targeting elderly patients, whose chances of death were higher. Additionally, the disorganized method of keeping medical records at the time made it difficult to detect his crimes. However, in 2000, the tide began to turn, and the guillotine drew closer to his neck due to a simple mistake he made. Harold's downfall began in 1998 when a local funeral attendant noticed that the number of cremation forms signed by Harold was unusually high. This sharp observation was shared with Dr. Linda, who worked at Brook Clinic, the same clinic where Harold worked. Linda contacted a forensic doctor named John Pollard and informed him of this concerning observation. However, because the bodies were cremated and turned to ashes, investigations failed to find any incriminating evidence. It is said that every story has an end, whether happy or sad. On June 24, 1998, Kathleen Grundy, an 81-year-old wealthy widow and former mayor of Hyde, passed away. Grundy was found dead in her home shortly after a visit from Harold Shipman. However, Harold did not realize that he had made a grave mistake. Unlike most of his victims, whose bodies were cremated, thus making the evidence disappear, Kathleen Grundy was not cremated but buried, meaning her body could be exhumed and examined. The second mistake he did not consider was that Kathleen had an only daughter, a skilled lawyer named Angela Woodruff. Angela's conscience was never at ease with Shipman's explanation for her mother's death, which occurred when Kathleen was in excellent health before visiting Dr. Harold. Angela had even visited her mother on the morning of the same day. She was declared dead from old age. After Angela completed the funeral and mourning procedures, she sat with herself and began to reflect on the memories, and that's when she sensed something suspicious had happened. Her suspicions reached their peak when she learned that her mother had left a will containing glaring errors. In the will, Kathleen stated that she was leaving all her savings, estimated at £30,000, to her doctor Harold Shipman. At this point, Angela had no doubt left in her mind, and she was certain that her mother had been murdered. Angela contacted the police and demanded an immediate investigation. The investigation began with exhuming Kathleen's body from the grave and having it autopsied by the forensic doctor to determine the cause of death. Meanwhile, Harold felt the noose tightening around his neck, and the police were on the verge of uncovering his actions. However, Harold tried to obstruct the investigation with all the devious tricks he knew, but the authorities avoided listening to him. On the contrary, his attempts only heightened the police's suspicions about him. After the body was exhumed and examined, it was discovered that the cause of Kathleen's death was a fatal dose of diamorphine. As a result, on September 7, 1998, Dr. Harold Shipman was arrested. With the investigation intensifying, his home was searched, where a typewriter was found matching the one used to write the will. It was clear that the goal had been to seize her fortune. The police discovered a treasure trove of evidence, including forged medical records for his patients, which had been altered to support his false claims. Harold Shipman was accused of murdering 15 patients, in addition to forgery and other crimes. There was no room left for him to hide. He was cornered with walls of evidence. Harold eventually confessed to killing more than 15 elderly women among his patients, and occasionally, he would forge the wills of his wealthy victims. After this major shock, the police expanded their investigations and discovered that workers at the morgue in the hospital where Shipman worked had previously reported their suspicions, but the police found nothing and ignored the matter. Therefore, they proceeded to exhume the graves of all the women who had died at the hands of Harold, one after the other, and re-autopsied and examined the bodies once more. At this exact moment, everyone was shocked to discover that the actual number of Harold Shipman's victims exceeded 250, most of whom died from a fatal injection of diamorphine. Shipman's defense team in court attempted to deceive, claiming that the patients died from natural causes and that any discrepancies in the records were due to administrative errors. However, the court gave no importance to this justification, as it was absurd compared to the overwhelming evidence that convicted him. However, due to the lack of conclusive evidence for all the other murders, the court decided to convict him based on the 15 murders he confessed to, which were proven with solid evidence, in addition to 1 count of forgery. As a result, on January 31, 2000, he was sentenced to life imprisonment 15 times with a recommendation that he should never be released. In 2004, during a routine prison patrol, Harold was found to have committed suicide in his cell in one of the most secure prisons in England. To this day, the true reason for Harold's targeting of elderly women remains unknown, as well as the conclusive reasons for his use of morphine injections. Some psychologists diagnosed his condition as a form of narcissistic personality disorder, concluding that it was a complex linked to his unconscious mind when he saw his mother in the hospital receiving this substance to alleviate her pain, interpreting it as him helping his patients end their lives peacefully to relieve them from their suffering. Others suggested that he derived pleasure from killing elderly women to feel as though he was a god who gives and takes life without any resistance or objection. During his trial and imprisonment, Shipman showed little remorse for his actions, and despite all the conclusive evidence against him, he maintained his innocence. This behavior confirms to analysts the depth of his mental illness and complexity. Shipman's horrific crimes led to major reforms in the medical field in England. These reforms included the requirement for doctors to prove their physical and mental fitness, stricter controls on the use of certain types of medications, particularly those that are controlled, and improvements to the death certification process to ensure greater scrutiny. The gruesome crimes committed by Harold, in which he exploited the trust, helplessness, vulnerability, and need for the help of his patients, created a significant barrier in British society and among everyone who heard Harold's story, both the public and doctors. The first assumption became that a doctor is considered evil until proven otherwise, which led to a loss of public trust in the medical profession. Rebuilding that trust, which is everything in the medical profession, required a tremendous effort from the medical community. The widespread media coverage surrounding Harold's story up to his sentencing drew the world's attention to his crimes, turning the chilling and mysterious nature of the case into a topic of extensive discussion about the failures of the healthcare system and the nature of evil in human nature. The story didn't end there. It inspired several authors to write books and novels, as well as films, series, and documentaries, all detailing the story of Dr. Harold Shipman, the killer who turned into an angel of death instead of an angel of mercy. For those who want to hear this story on Spotify or dive deeper into the details, you can get the full ebook, which contains additional events and exclusive insights not covered in this video. You'll find all the links in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more gripping stories. Thank you for your support, and see you soon in a new tale.